Hi! Christmas is over now. Anyways, we watched the first part yesterday, and now we're going to see the Pacific Rim Jaegers fight Rodan, Mothra, and Ghidorah this time, and see how that goes. Because last time, they just got stomped. The Jaegers just got fucked. Which I guess wasn't too surprising, because, you know, Monsterverse Titans are just... they're crazy! So yeah, I'm curious to see how they'll do against Rodan, Mothra, and Ghidorah. I don't think they stand a chance against Ghidorah, but Mothra and Rodan, they probably have a better chance. Not sure how much better of a chance they'll have, but... well, I'll find out, and maybe you will along the way too. So let's get into it.
Previously on Goji Center, we witnessed 3 scenarios where Pacific Rim Jaegers took on 3 Monsterverse kaiju.
And they all got fucked.
The result, utter destruction.
Yeah.
But there's a lot more to endure. Now, after facing 3 terrestrial monsters, how would Pacific Rim Jaegers face airborne Monsterverse Titans?
Ooh.
Coming up, our Jaeger Squadron...
oh yeah, I didn't even realize that. They're all airborne, and last video they said that they didn't have a jump function, which is probably going to be their downfall.
Equipped with all sorts of weaponry, will square up against Titanus Rodan, Mothra,
Then again, they have ranged attacks, so they can probably try some stuff.
and the legendary Monster Zero. Will the Jaegers survive this time, or will there again be carnage? Find out.
Well, one thing I just feel like I already know is that they are not beating King Ghidorah. I mean, you see this shit? Look at this! Look at this! I don't think they are beating this, okay? Rodan and Mothra, maybe. I don't know. I'm about to find out. But Ghidorah, nah, they're fucked.
Out and watch till the end as we witness Pacific Rim Jaegers versus Monsterverse
Was that a Jaeger going for a Mothra, baby?
Titans Part 2.
Okay.
Before we begin putting Jaeger's strategy to the test, let's see if your strategic skills are up to par with the turn to the episode.
Alright.
Today, the simulation platforms will be filled with Jaegers ready to combat 3 Titans seen in the film Godzilla King of the Monsters.
Yay.
Note that the way these fights play out will be a lot different than in the previous episode.
Oh,
why?
okay.
Because these are all airborne kaiju,
Well, yeah.
creatures with the capability of flight. But not only that, some of these are capable of flying at extremely high speeds,
Yeah.
automatically making these scenarios very difficult for the Jaegers.
Rodan was crazy in the movie, but I don't think he got that much screen time. I would have loved to see more of it, though, because he looked cool as shit.
To win, but there is some hope for the Jaegers this time. Before we reveal this,
hell is that?
Recap the corporal build of these fighting machines. As mentioned previously,
Is that a different Jaeger model, or am I just being confused? And that's just one of the models from the last movie, or from the last video. I don't know.
weight of these Jaegers varied a lot depending on which official source you're looking at, but a more accurate figure is around the 7,000 ton mark. To put this into perspective, that's only around 300 to 400 tons short of the weight of the metal framing of the Eiffel Tower.
Okay.
So yes, that's pretty heavy. But
yeah,
compared against
obviously.
these kaiju, well, we have a problem. Fortunately for the Jaegers, 2 out of the 3 contestants are much lighter than the kaiju they faced in the previous episode. But will this be enough to pull off their first win? Up next,
yeah, that's the huge question. Will their size and weight even mean shit? Well, let's find out.
Jaegers will face a Titan that will pick them apart if not careful. Number 1, Jaegers versus Rodan.
All right, we're going for Rodan first.
In this scenario, our squadron of Jaegers will face a Titan infamous for its superb airborne combat abilities, fast speeds, and array of dangerous weapons.
Yeah.
In order to have a good idea of the outcome of a fight between these 2 contestants, we need to compare their builds.
Yeah, and I believe they called Rodan the Fire Demon, so I guess I mean, hell, it already looks like it's on fire, so I'm curious to see what kind of extra fire abilities it has, because I don't remember seeing too much in the movie. Then again, I've seen King of Monsters, like, once, and I've seen Kong vs. Godzilla, like, at least twice. So, let's see what happens.
One end, a squadron of Jaegers, each weighing anywhere between 6,000 to 7,000 tons, and standing at an average height of 230 to 280 feet. Equipped with superheated blade weaponry, maces, guided missiles, and special melee weapons such as the Arc Whip. On the other end, we have Titanus Rodan, a biovolcanic monster with a massive wingspan of 871 feet,
Damn.
but dwarfed by the Jaegers in terms of standing height.
Okay.
Slouched at 154 feet, Rodan could potentially see this reduced if he stands more upright, but not enough to surpass the 280 feet mark.
Yeah.
However, as mentioned earlier, Monsterverse Kaiju have a critical edge over any Jaeger. Weight.
Yeah.
Titanus Rodan weighs a whopping 39,000 tons. On average, that's approximately 5.5 times heavier than any one of these Jaegers,
Damn.
assuming they were all 7,000 tons. This
Huh, look at that. Size really doesn't matter.
alone will make it very difficult for these robots to body this Titan. On the contrary, the fact that Rodan can move at high speeds with this much weight can only spell death for any of these pilots.
Yeah.
The factors to look
To me, it sounds like he's just gonna fly right through a couple of them, or at least send them flying.
out for would be speed, melee weapons, and terrain compatibility. Let us explain a plausible scenario between our combatants. A squadron of Jaegers stands ready to engage a massive flying kaiju. Given that these Jaegers are terrestrial combatants, the only thing they can do is wait for Rodan to approach them. But knowing Rodan, this kaiju won't just gracefully land in front of them and introduce
Yeah.
himself. Rodan will strike to kill.
Yeah.
What would this look like? A relatively heavy kaiju like Rodan, moving much faster than the speed of sound, will have a
I did recently watch the Rodan versus Mothra fight from King of Monsters, and I gotta say, it was a lot better than I thought it would be.
ton of kinetic energy waiting to be immediately converted into something known as impact energy.
No.
We won't bore you with
Yeah.
all the math involved, but put simply, if Rodan happens to make contact with either its pointy talons or sharp beak, this only means that the Jaegers would literally, and we mean literally, get pulverized to shreds upon impact, almost as if they were hit by a small meteor. Knowing this, if Rodan just happens to ambush
Yeah, because getting hit by something really heavy like that going really fucking fast would most likely do that.
the squadron from the right angle, it is technically possible for Rodan to wipe out most of this squadron in a split second.
Yeah.
No matter what weapons these Jaegers possessed, Rodan's dense,
Like, these guys better be able to spot that thing quick.
heavy build would make these obsolete. Would Rodan be smart enough to attack in such a fashion? Maybe, but it's possible. So how would these Jaegers have a chance? A more effective strategy would be to spread out to avoid getting wiped with one strike like the previous attack, and wait for Rodan to be close enough to the ground for them to deploy weapons such as the gravity sling, and hopefully hold down Rodan, waiting for another Jaeger to approach with a bladed weapon and strike him on some vital organ.
All
But
right.
even this is difficult. We have seen Rodan impaled before, so there is no guarantee that this strike might even be effective.
Yeah.
Rodan wouldn't be a pushover
Because while Mothra was able to get Rodan with that, it didn't exactly die.
on land either.
Like, at all.
This beak's shape and size would easily be able to grab onto any of these Jaegers' limbs and hack them right off.
Yeah. My damn thing keeps on logging into a different YouTube account, because I react to videos on a different YouTube account and everything. Okay, let's get back into this.
But having said this, the possibilities of Rodan engaging in a purely terrestrial fight is quite low, and would probably resort on cycle charges to wipe out this entire squadron, making defeating Rodan an almost impossible feat. This is without mentioning its thunderclap or cyclonic drift abilities, both being able to disorient and create a shockwave capable of damaging surrounding crafts.
All right.
Could these Jaegers fight in the sky? Not quite. What you see here are just simple means
Okay, so they can fly, but they can't jump.
of transporting Jaegers,
Oh.
which would make them even more prone to getting ambushed in the air.
Yeah.
The next kaiju on this list fights differently and relies on other interesting sorts of weapons.
So yeah, it seems like the Pacific Rim Jaegers are still getting screwed by Rodan, but at least they'll have a better chance against Rodan than literally any of the three kaijus in the last video. Now let's see about
Number
Mothra.
2, Jaegers versus Mothra. In this scenario, humanity finally found a way to piss off Mothra. And
Somehow.
now the queen of the Mothra.
How do you how do you piss off Mothra? Like, isn't that like one of the most peaceful kaijus? Like, how do you piss off Mothra? I mean, unless you attack its one of its babies or something, then I can say that could, you know, piss it off.
Monsters turns against the human race and decides that they too must perish. But can humanity hold her off? There are two ways to handle this, and for this, we must know a little bit of Mothra's life cycle.
All right.
Every incarnation of Mothra begins with an egg. Once hatched, a larva will emerge, but this one fights back. Equipped with some considerable-sized mandibles and a silk web that can be fired from its mouth and trap small to medium-sized opponents. But how does this measure up against a Jaeger? Well, unfortunately for the larva, these can stand more than 5 times her height. Silk attacks from this smaller larva will not be enough to ensnare a 280-foot-tall Jaeger, meaning that a successful war against Mothra would have to be waged early. This way, humanity...
Yeah, because against the baby Mothra, that's pretty much a guaranteed win for the Jaegers.
will have a better chance at defeating this kaiju early on before it evolves into its next winged and more dangerous form. But what if humanity failed to find this egg early and now has to face off against a more mature Mothra? Well, here is where things get a little more interesting. Although Mothra is a very strong kaiju, this matchup is actually a little more evenly matched than the previous ones we have seen. First off, let's begin by mentioning that Mothra is not that much bigger than its larva form, measuring up to a measly 52 feet in height.
Yeah, the main thing that makes Mothra look big is its wingspan.
We aren't completely sure about its weight, but given that its body is only a fraction of the size of Rodan's, we can guess that it's much less than 39,000 tons. Perhaps equal or less than the weight of these Jaegers, without accounting for the weight of the wings. Meaning that for this particular matchup, melee weaponry will now be a determining factor in the outcome of the fight, along with corporal builds and maneuverability. In this particular matchup, Titanus Masura will no longer have the vast weight advantage seen in the previous matchups, meaning that Mothra will now have to think critically if it even thinks about standing a chance against a squadron of Jaegers. There are two weapons that Mothra possesses that could give pause to these machines. One is its silk attack ability. In a previous face-off video, we discussed that this silk is so strong given that this material is proportionally stronger than steel. What does this mean for our Jaegers?
And if it can hold Ghidorah's head to a building for like a few seconds, I imagine it's pretty fucking strong.
Means that a combatant without bladed weaponry would easily be ensnared or even handicapped by the silk attack. Other better-equipped Jaegers, such as the Saber Athena, for instance, could use her ionic twin blades to cut right through this silk, allowing it to continue fighting. Bladed weaponry is something to look out for in Mothra's case. Given that her wings are relatively thin, one well-placed strike at any of her winged appendages would render her flightless and at the mercy of a much taller Jaeger. That is if Mothra even decides to fly this low. Another method of attack that is available to Mothra is plunge diving from high altitudes and leveraging her close-range weapons such as her stinger and spiked legs to inflict damage right on the Jaeger's command center, or head, where the pilots are housed. Knowing this, the likelihood of Mothra defeating a...
the way I see it is that it probably would not go in Mothra's favor at all, unless Mothra got really lucky, knew where the Jaeger pilots were, specifically in the head, and aimed straight for the head and all of them, and successfully hits the pilots. Because if the pilots are down, then pretty much the whole robot's down, pretty much. So Mothra would probably have to, but even then, even doing that, I imagine it'd be hard to do that with all four. So Mothra's probably gonna have to follow Thanos' advice for this: aim for the head.
A single Jaeger is plausible, but under very specific circumstances. One wrong, careless move could spell defeat for the Queen of the Monsters. This is without mentioning that this smaller kaiju could very well be vulnerable to missile weaponry, potentially granting the Jaeger program its first win against the Monsterverse plethora of...
because I see the Jaegers getting a win more than a loss against Mothra in this, because... it just... no. Mothra seems more like a support monster than anything whenever it comes to this, but obviously that support isn't unarmed, obviously. But that's honestly what I can see Mothra being more classified as if we're classifying the monsters.
Titans. But now,
Yeah, so now that they got their win, it's probably going to be their one and only win because of who's next.
the Jaeger squad will have to look out and hold on tight because they will be about to combat the most difficult challenge yet.
Yep.
Number 3, Jaegers versus Ghidorah.
Yep.
After a shaky outcome against Mothra, the Jaeger program will now have to face the largest and perhaps most malevolent kaiju seen in the Monsterverse, Monster Zero. Just standing in front of this Titan would be an extremely terrifying.
Imagine if Ghidorah worked like the Hydra too, like you take one head off, 2 more grow back. Does it actually, I don't know if it actually works like that. I don't think it does though. But imagine if it did, like that would just make Ghidorah even stronger.
experience. Simply put, this Titan measures 521 feet in height, completely dwarfing the largest members of this Jaeger squadron.
Yeah.
The smaller ones? Well, it's almost as if they're not even there.
Yeah.
In the real world, animals who are about to engage in combat do anything they can to appear bigger than they actually are, in an attempt to further intimidate their opponent. Here, Ghidorah doesn't even have to do this. But
Yeah,
since this guy loves inflicting terror on its adversary, we can imagine a scenario where Ghidorah stands tall and arrogantly challenges our squadron of Jaegers, knowing very well that it might win this fight. But will it? Another thing to touch on is the fact that this kaiju is also the heaviest in the Monsterverse, weighing up to a massive 141,000 tons, outweighing Godzilla, Kong, Behemoth, Rodan, everyone. Or about the weight of 20 large Jaegers. Note that unlike Rodan or Mothra, this guy can actually fight well on land. The factors to look out for are corporal builds, mobility, and special weapons and terrain. If you know anything about Monster Zero, you'll realize that this is no longer a fight. This
is pretty much just an execution for Ghidorah. For the Jaegers, it's just survival. That's all this is. And not a good survival, because they're not going to survive this. They're just not.
Execute.
Unless the electric breath from this thing works like Thor on Iron Man, where, you know, you just charge up the suit or anything. I don't see this. That's pretty much execution. It's just a normal execution for Ghidorah. And, well, specifically Ghidorah executing the Jaegers. And for the Jaegers, this is just survival.
One which will be hard to escape from. But our Jaegers here have no choice but to fight their way out of this scenario. To understand what could potentially
they're not winning this. They gotta run. The only option they have is run at this point.
Happen to these Jaegers during a confrontation. Let's quickly run over some of the many weapons that this Titan possesses. 1. A 3-headed body, each self-conscious and capable of making their own decisions. With sharp teeth capable of shredding and pulling anything apart with collaborative effort. Any
they were throwing Godzilla around.
Any of these 3 heads would only find itself dismembered limb from limb. Now, you may think just because these are robots, the pilots may remain unharmed. While true, whatever corporal damage that is inflicted on these Jaegers is felt to some degree by the pilots, meaning that the—
Really? They didn't think to, you know, get rid of something like that, and that is just poor design choice, really. Because, like, you could do so much in those things without having to, you know, feel pain. Because, like, taking away the pain factor in a fight or anything gives you a huge advantage, all right? Because the pain's going to affect you in huge ways. Take the pain factor away, and there's a lot of shit you can do despite getting impaled and shit.
These guys will suffer intense pain. And this also goes for the methods seen in the previous episode. We should also mention this Titan's special abilities. For starters, a fight with this monster will probably take place in a Category 6 hurricane, with strong winds, restless lightning strikes, tornadoes, you name it. Ghidorah brings with him the apocalypse. In addition to this guy can fire its infamous gravity beam from all 3 of its mouths directly into one target, causing severe burn damage, disintegrating any smaller creatures, and in this Jaeger's case, inflict superheated damage, and potentially fry their circuits, rendering these things useless. But does Ghidorah have to fire on these individually? No. If near a power source, Ghidorah could absorb this energy and amplify it, causing a chain lightning reaction capable of affecting all surrounding craft, critically damaging.
Yeah, because doesn't he just need to do that and then the fight's pretty much just over?
A large number of these at once. This may sound hopeless for the Jaegers, but you've seen nothing. An airborne Ghidorah would be much more lethal, as seen before with Rodan. A 141,000-ton Titan flying at 630 miles per hour would generate enough impact force to demolish anything under its feet.
Yeah.
Will Ghidorah suffer from any melee damage?
Perhaps. Well,
but
probably.
As seen in the previous episode, these kaiju are in a league of their own in density and weight, meaning that any weapon strike would...
Yeah, if anything, it's just gonna feel like a small bit of pain, but it ain't gonna do shit in the long run.
Find it harder to penetrate. But not only that, these Jaegers...
Hell, it's not even... Hell, I'm not even sure if you would call that a flesh wound at this point, because Jesus.
...are fighting Ghidorah. You know, the kaiju that can regenerate in seconds? Out of all of the Jaeger versus Titan matchups,
okay, so it can
this
regenerate.
one would have potentially been the most difficult to survive from. Not only...
But it can't regenerate like the Hydra. But I imagine you'd rather fight the Hydra than Ghidorah. Well, actually, I don't know. Which one is stronger, the Hydra or Ghidorah? And, well, I guess it would depend on what form of Hydra, I guess. Because aren't there, like, multiple adaptations of the Hydra, too? Yeah, it'd probably depend on which version.
Because of its...
Although here's one thing where Ghidorah wins in that situation. Ghidorah versus Hercules Hydra? Yeah, Ghidorah wins.
...melee capabilities, but because...
I think.
Because running away from this guy is almost impossible.
Yeah.
Are there any other Monsterverse kaiju that the Jaegers could actually defeat?
I don't know, are there?
Kaiju from Pacific Rim can stand a chance against any of these titans? Let us know in the comments.
It ain't seeming like it.
Don't forget to subscribe, smack that like button, and be on the look.
I don't know, is there... I'm trying to think of a kaiju that... Like, I don't know if they can. Can they beat a skull crawler? Specifically the big one? Hell, it could, how much trouble would they have dealing with just a regular skull crawler? Like, Jesus. Like, I can't think of a Monsterverse monster that's the Jaegers would have a good time dealing with other than Mothra, and even then they wouldn't even realistically they wouldn't even fight Mothra because like who pisses off? How does humanity piss off Mothra? Like, how do you piss off Mothra? Like, and even if they did, I mean, the Jaegers obviously win against that. That's the only win they've got out of all of these. Like, Jesus. They are screwed against the Monsterverse. I thought they'd have a chance against them because I didn't know shit about them until I watched the first one. And then after that, it's just like, they are screwed. They would not survive against the Monsterverse. Especially since they just thought like, hey, let me keep in the pain inhibitors and make myself feel pain from whatever these Jaegers feel and just make it worse for myself like a goddamn idiot. You should have taken that shit out because that is just bad design choice. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and check out the original video, which I'll leave the link for in the description below. And I will see you and whatever I make next. Have a good day, and I'll see you later. Goodbye.